I don't know, maybe this year. It's by Jeff Tarran from Gunderson Direct, and it'll give you insights into why direct marketing is a can't lose strategy. Long term, it is the way to go. I'll tag him. Sometimes he DMs me back, but either way, I always enjoy his work. What? So here's the greatest. This is one of the greatest articles ever. We're going to give it a full 9 minutes. Because first of all, it has testing in the headline. How could you do better than that? Jeff knows my soul, right? This is about direct marketing. This is not about direct mail per se or creative per se. Okay? He says, as a rule, response to a creative execution deteriorates over time. Now, according to Ritson and other recent studies, like in mass media, TV commercials, for example, there is a halo effect that increases over time, and there is little deterioration except in the minds of the creatives who want to do a new commercial. So you have to be careful with this, and I think Jeff says that throughout a couple of times in here. Okay, but it doesn't necessarily deteriorate. It depends a little on if you have a moving parade, and oftentimes direct marketing is like that. Okay, so let's say you have a tree trimming business, right? And it really heats up if there's like a hurricane or something like that. Andrew Ettinger talks about this. Okay, he's got a client like this, and the tree trimming business puts out a postcard every month to about 20,000 people around New England, and then Sandy hit. And they call it superstorm, but it wasn't even a hurricane. It was just a tropical storm that got there on full moon, which made the tides rise and the surge. The whole thing just was well, it's also the planning of the subways in New York that don't expect it ever to be raining a lot. and they quit running. The pumps quit running when the water rises a little too high, and then it really rises. And everything drains downhill, so you're stuck. But anyway, all of that aside, the tree trimming business just did it to get in your head so that when you need tree trimming, when you need a tree cut out of your house that's fallen on it, you know where to go. Okay, it's the opposite of being there at the right time. It's the development of brand influence, long-term branding, long-term. When you need tree trimming, you'll call Acme Tree Trimming, whatever it is. When you need us, call us. And Andrew does a lot of HVAC also. I don't usually call HVAC people unless my furnace isn't working or my air conditioner or something else, And but I know who to call. There's a sticker on my furnace, right? And Andrew encourages that too. So that aside, always be testing. ABT creative strategy. That was the first thing I learned in direct mail from Vic Hunter, was always be testing. Okay. You always want to find a new creative, but you also want to find tweaks and other things. Do you have a lift letter? You know what a lift letter is? Well, call me. If you want an hour of my time, join the WDMA, pay a little money, and we'll talk. Otherwise, we'll do 15 minutes. Happy to meet you. I love doing the 15-minute meetings, and they're always fun. And, just john@wdma.org, or reach out to me on LinkedIn. You're more likely to have LinkedIn work. Happy to spend 15 minutes with you, or really look at your creative, and that takes a little bit more. But anyway, there's a lot of things that you can tweak. I gave a talk at one of the national DMA shows in New Orleans long ago on testing. What to test when the well runs dry. It's exactly the problem. And, send me your creative and we'll talk about what to test. But the good tests are not the obvious. Like I got this one a couple months ago, right? And I've talked about it. And there's a QR code, but there's no offer. Okay? That you don't need to test should you have an offer. You don't need to test should you have a response device. If there's no URL, no phone number, no address, return address, no nothing, right? It's not going to get responses. It may be effective as a branding tool, but it will not get responses. Oakley handed me there when I was working with USPS with Elena Neely, and we went into Oakley headquarters, and they handed me their mailing piece, and I said, "Well, there's no response device. How would I even order these?" "Oh, it's in the body copy here. There's the 800 number or whatever." I said, "No, that doesn't count." I've increased response 20, 30%. Just put it on there. Just make it big. Right? It's not hard. You don't need to test that stuff. You don't need to test the big things. You don't need to test the trivial things like moving the whether bullet points has a star or a round button or something. Although Craig Huey does often mention things that I would think were pretty trivial. So part of what makes a good test is it's what do we already know that's obvious and what isn't going to have enough impact to make a difference. And it's in that middle ground that the great tests happen. Okay? And so this is about how Gunderson Direct approaches testing. First, getting the thing opened, and that applies even if it's a catalog. Not so much with a postcard. It kind of works. Postcards are kind of always open. But test against a postcard because, like in South America, they don't trust the Postal Service. They don't like everybody knowing what you're offering them. Okay, and when we tested a number 10 in a number 10 envelope mailer with a letter instead of a postcard, it had 4 times the response that the postcard did. So it depends on the culture, right? Marketing timeliness is next to godliness. I don't know. That's a digital thing. We never believed we could hit the nail on the head. We wanted to create a long-term impression. We wanted to create compelling reason to make a decision now. But we didn't necessarily hope to get it there on the right day. Okay, that's not a thing. Not a thing in direct mail. So I don't worry too much about that, but it's good to tell them why you're writing. Okay, it's good to have an occasion. So I'm okay with seasonal mailings, with a holiday card or a Valentine's card if you're selling candy or something beforehand, or a Christmas in July, anything almost. I don't think they're very effective, but they're something to put on the outside of the envelope. Those are the kinds of things to test, but you can only test them like once a year. So test something else first. Test major stuff before you worry about the tweaks. This is almost kind of true, unless you're making major mistakes, which they probably aren't at Gunderson. So he means, not the tweaks, but above the tweaks. But the major stuff they probably already know. Okay, address objections. Why don't people buy? Why are they not buying? Always something to think about, right? And sometimes you can answer it or you can avoid them in the first place. David Ogilvy talks about in his book, Confessions of an Ad Man. He talks about, if you have kidney stones, read this ad or something. If you have bladder failure, read this ad. And he just says, you'll just rule out the people that don't. It's simple. Right? Most people don't buy because they don't have the problem that you're trying to solve. So tell them the problem. And maybe you'll attract the people that do have the problem at least. And you'll rule out the people that don't. I tried that theme with Cardizim when I was working on that campaign. One of the first times they ever tried direct mail, Mary Merrill Dow. And I said, how about this ad? Cardizim users, read this ad or drop dead. They didn't go for it. It would have been a super hit. Anyway, you still got to get client approval most of the time. Okay, what else are you saying and where? Think about online, and Jeff mentions this down a little bit further. A lot of times you can do a really solid test, all the way to EBITDA, ROI, in mail. But then you can leverage it into social media and mass media. You can find out what works and move it there. Make sure you do, okay? If it's close, retest. One of the things that this doesn't get into is that you really want to think about why you're testing. Why, right? It's the old observation, hypothesis, then test. Too many mailers over the years I've seen just come up with other things to test. Let's do a red envelope instead of a green one, or instead of a white one, or whatever. Why? Why would you do that? Okay? And if you have an observation and then you have a hypothesis, and the hypothesis is either confirmed or disconfirmed, Okay, so let's think of a test. Okay, let's test. When I worked for the Billy Graham Association, their type was too small in some of their ads. Got no response at all. Zero response. Zero. It went to, after an 8-point type, it was smaller than that. The body copy was smaller than that. Zero responses. Okay, so the hypothesis was the typeface matters. Okay, now you do an A-B split. You can do that in your magazine ads oftentimes, and you find out. Okay, let's test the exact same creative, exact same ads. We'll do a 9-point and a 7-point. Do enough difference that there is a difference, or maybe a 10-point and a 7-point, and see what happens. Just that. It'll have more white space, the 7-point. It should be more lovely, more calming with the white space. Okay, but I bet it would do 0. Okay, and then you've confirmed it, and then you can extrapolate it. Otherwise, all you know is that ad with the smaller type seemed to do worse. But if you can extrapolate it, then you never do 7-point type again. Not until you get a new CMO. That's what happens. Okay, yeah, test digital integration. I recommend you test backwards. There's a way to fast test, as I mentioned, in digital. Then you take that as the observation and you extrapolate that hypothesis and experiment against it. And then when you prove it for real with mail, then you go back and reformulate your key benefits, your headline, and etc. The other thing that isn't in here is when we were testing creative, that was always secondary. The main thing we tested, and it is in here, I remember, because it says look into segments on the back end. List is the biggest factor. If you send beard conditioning to, well, you might sell a few. If you sell it to wives, send it to wives who don't like their husband's scratchy beard. You might get a few. You never know. One of the big breakthroughs for Victoria's Secret was that they sort of accidentally mailed it to men at their office, and that got a big hit. That was a big hit. That was a breakthrough. This is years back, when nobody knew who they were. And Sports Illustrated once did a commercial on Saturday morning television cartoons. And that was a big hit because the dad didn't care about watching the cartoons. He was just up with the kids so mom could sleep. And, if you put the ad in the middle of a big football game, nobody wants to leave to go order their Sports Illustrated. And by the time the game's over, everybody's forgotten it. But in Saturday morning cartoons, the dad would get up, go over to the phone and say, oh, yeah, I'd like to get Sports Illustrated, which they've been sending me lately. I don't know. I didn't subscribe. I don't know why. Gentleman's Quarterly, Sports Illustrated, a bunch of them are coming all of a sudden to my office. I have no idea. Anyway, so think about the list. Yeah, you can sometimes make mistakes, and actually they work really well. We once mailed a specialty catalog to amusement park business. It did great, but they didn't pay. Back when we had open account. Anyway, so list is the first, and then you get to creative, and you can do two-dimensional testing at the same time if you know what you're doing. And again, if you want to talk about it, give me a call. My phone number is scrolling below. Have a great day. Like and share. This was a little bit long, but it was a masterclass from Jeff Tarran and John Miglosh.